Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Waffle Flower Crafts. In today's video, we are going to take a look at the new Sneak Peek Kit number 11 and create this love theme card featuring the new kit. Before we get started, let's take a look at what's included in the kit. First up is the Postage Collage Rose stencil set. There's 3 stencils in this set. We're going to use this to create our focal point for today's card. Next up is another stencil. This is the Bokeh Heart stencil. We're going to use this for the background of our card. Also included is the very awesome Sentiments or Subsentiments Love die cuts. I love these. I use them always when I get them. We're going to use this for our sentiment, of course. And then this sentiment die, which I'm not going to be using. This is the Print and Script with Love die set. Really great dies, but I won't be using them on today's card. In addition to that, the Sneak Peek Kit 11, I'll also be using the Postage Collage die to create my focal point. I'm going to start with the Postage Collage die and actually die cut some white cardstock. I'm just going to focus on these 4 squares here because those are the only ones I'm going to actually ink blend. I've grabbed the first stencil from the Postage Collage Rose stencil set, lined it up with my die cut, and I'm going to start by ink blending all the roses except for one with Barn Door Distress ink, and I'm using the new shader brush 1 Plus to ink blend these. For these roses, I'm just going to simply ink blend a nice flat color of red. I also am ink blending some of the hearts in the upper left panel. Once I finish ink blending with the barn door, I'll then take a dry microfiber towel and kind of clean up any of that ink that's left on the stencil. And then we're going to move on to Aged Mahogany Distress ink, and I'm moving on to a different shader brush. This is shader brush 2. It's more of a linear brush, and it's just going to really help me get in here and ink blend some of this darker red along the base of every one of the petals to kind of create more of a gradation, create the look of depth, and just add a lot more interest and realism to these flowers. Starting with that largest flower there, once I finish ink blending all of the petals there, I'll move on to ink blending the other flowers. Again, starting at the base of the petal, so where the petal would kind of gather at the center of the flower or where the petal would kind of meet at the stem, that's where I'm adding the shadow. In some places I've kind of guessed, I just assume that might be where the base of the flower is, or the petal is. And but as long as you get a little bit of this contrast on some of the petals, you don't let it completely overwhelm them, it's going to create a lot of interest and add a lot of depth. Now I'm going to ink blend this last little flower here first in Kitsch Flamingo, and then again with that shader brush 2 Plus. Again, I'm ink blending at the base of the petals. This one's a little bit smaller flower, so I'm just doing the best I can. Some of the petals won't get ink blended with that picked raspberry. And I'll also use some of that picked raspberry to ink blend the remaining hearts in this stencil layer. I'll go ahead and remove this stencil and be ready for stencil number 2. Stencil number 2 is the leaves. I'm going to start by ink blending all of the leaves with Rustic Wilderness. Again, just like with the barn door, this is a nice flat ink blend, not really trying to kind of create a gradation with this color, just kind of getting all of these leaves and stems completely colored with this green. Once I get that kind of base down with the Rustic Wilderness, we'll move on to Forest Moss, which is a very dark kind of olivey green, and start to ink blend some gradations. I've moved on to shader brush 0 Plus here, which is a round small shader brush, and this really helps to kind of ink blend a little gradation along or over the leaves, and as well as get some of that darker green on the stems. That creates a lot of contrast and a lot more interest. Now we're moving on to the final stencil in this set, and we're simply going to ink blend all of these little like stars in Crushed Olive Distress ink. Any brush would do for this. I am using this shader brush 0 Plus just because it's nice and small, and these are kind of small little shapes. Now that I finished ink blending, I'm going to grab my scissors here and just cut off that excess, as well as cut out each one of my postage stamps. Just as long as you cut right down the middle, you'll get a beautiful perfect border along each of these stamps, which is really awesome because I'm going to use them kind of separate them to use them for my focal point. Now I've placed 2 stencils on the side right along the stitched line of the stencils. First started on the lower right, now I moved up to the upper left, and I'm just ink blending a little bit of sponge sugar on those corners, still trying to keep that little bit of white border where the stitched from the stitch line to the edge, and that just creates a little bit more interest in this background. It's very subtle and very easy to do, using the grip mat to hold these stencils in place. And I'm repeating this process on 3 of the postage stamps that I made with that Postage Collage rose stencil set and Postage Collage die. Once I finish ink blending those 3 stamps, or those 3 rectangles, I'm ready to add some final details. I'm going to grab a Jelly Roll 10 white gel pen here and just add a highlight to all of the leaves, little hearts, of course all of the petals of the roses, and just repeat this process. Just adds a little bit more definition, a little bit more interest. Really does start to make these petals look kind of almost shiny and pop out at you, but it'll kind of incorporate the background, which we will get to next. So now I'm moving on to the Bokeh Heart stencil, and I'm actually going to emboss with it, dry emboss. I have an A2 panel here of some cream or off-white cardstock. I'm going to very lightly spritz it with some water, so like 1 spray, very little water here. Then I'll place the stencil on top. I have a rubber mat underneath my cardstock, then my stencil, and then I'll top it with my embossing plate. This is the sandwich for the Spellbinder's Platinum die cutting machine. Your die cutting machine might differ, but you definitely will need a rubber mat for this. And here's the finished result. It has some nice texture. Then I'm going to grab the stencil again, place it over those embossed areas, and then simply ink blend with antique linen just to kind of make those hearts pop a little bit more. If you don't have a rubber mat, you can just kind of skip the embossing step of this card and just go to the ink blending here with the antique linen. But that little bit of embossing does kind of make them pop a little bit more and adds a little bit more interest. After ink blended with antique linen, I am then going to add a highlight to all of my hearts, again with my white Jelly Roll pen here, just adding a little highlight here and there, not really focusing on a light source or anything, just kind of create a little contrast and a little bit of shine. Once I finish with my Jelly Roll pen, I'll remove the stencil and our background is pretty much done. I'm going to go ahead and adhere it to an A2 top folding white card base with some liquid adhesive. Once I get that stuck down, we'll be ready to kind of arrange our postage stamps or our little squares that we created earlier. I've got them kind of arranged here in a not necessarily a symmetrical way, but I liked how this arrangement looks, so I went ahead and picked it up with my a piece of press and seal. Then I'm going to grab some foam adhesive strips and add it to the back side of my postage stamps. Remove the backing on those, and then I'll stick it down onto my card front. Once I finish with that, I'll remove the press and seal. I did have one little postage stamp that kind of didn't quite stick, so I'm just going to stick it on by hand, kind of get it lined up and place it down. Then I'm going to grab my sub-sentiment here, which is actually going to be my sentiment. I'm going to use some black foam adhesive. I have one strip stuck down, just remove the backing on it. I'm going to stick another strip right on top of it, cut off the excess. So basically I have double foam adhesive here because I want this to kind of pop a little bit, and it's going to sit directly onto the card front and has to be over our postage stamps, which are already lifted up with one layer of foam adhesive, so I needed 2 to kind of go over it. And that's the finished card. I hope to the camera here seeing a good look at all the details. I love all the depth that we were able to create by ink blending with just 2 colors and using those awesome new shader brushes. The little highlight even adds more, and our background is just really beautiful and I think perfect for this, keeping the focal point the focus of the card. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.